Hello everyone and welcome to Film Companion South. On Wednesday, August 25th, Noel Kirthiraj, co-founder and CEO of MAAJJA, spoke to the press about some of the controversies around the company. The conversation focused a lot on the rapper Arivu, the question of payments, and the Rolling Stone cover, and so on and so forth. This segment of the interaction, the one that you're just about to see in this video, has Noel Kirthiraj's answers to the questions put forward by me and by music journalist Amit Gurbaxani. The very first thing I want to ask is, I was a little confused when I saw the word featuring in when MAAJJA released the Enjoy Enjoy Me song. When it said artist, it said the featuring Arivu. The confusion came about because let's take one of my favorite songs from Lethal Weapon 3, which shows you how old I am. But anyway, it says it's a song called It's Probably Me, and it says Sting featuring Eric Clapton. So it's basically the song is sung by Sting. Clapton is basically backing it with the guitar. So it's like it's not an equal kind of thing. It's basically a song, the voice, everything is Sting's, and Clapton is kind of doing his thing. He's not singing or whatever it is. Whereas in this song, it's like the and Arivu are they have an equal part to play in the song itself. And going beyond that, Arivu has written the lyrics and he's there, and so I was a little like I wasn't sure how the word featuring came in there. So could you just explain that how that word, how did you decide that that would be the terminology you used?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the reason for all these concern and confusion is the context or the origin of how the song came about, etc., was never really communicated. And obviously, what that means is, you look at what you see, and it's understandable why there's concern or whatever, right? So what I would like is to kind of step back and give everyone a bit of a flavor of how this song even came about, right? I think I'm hoping that would, answer some of these. So it all started because when MAAJJA launched, essentially we saw that how broken or how complicated it was for actual artists to monetize whatever their intellectual property. And when you look at it across the board, what this means is now you have amazing talent, yet either prematurely or out of necessity, they don't stick with the art form, right? I mean, this has been the challenge that MAAJJA stepped up to address, because music is nothing new, and independent music particularly is nothing new. It's just that we saw a lot of structural challenges, and we felt there are better ways to go about it, right? So when we did this as part of the launch, we wanted to also create the ecosystem and infrastructure that would allow these artists who have amazing talent to have a place to showcase that, right? So that was how initially everything started. And we said, you know what, let's actually curate a festival where we will feature, artists from all over the world, and with different focus, different backgrounds, etc., so that we could show the world first and foremost, hey, look at the talent we have, right? And as a first stepping stone. So that is something that we started as one of the first activities, and we did a production in Chennai and around the world, actually. So what we said was, let's pick the artists that we have who are amazing, and let's get each of them to do a song, and ultimately show the world, right? Because at the end of the day, as you know, every day 50,000-60,000 songs come out, and there's no doubt about whether there's talent but how do you stand above the crowd? How do you make sure whatever you're producing and releasing is heard by people? That is the biggest challenge. So from MAAJJA perspective, we see lack of awareness as being one of the key hurdle for independent musicians, and we cannot wait for somebody else to create that awareness. So we feel whatever we can do to create that and give the platform would take that a bit closer to the need for the awareness, right? So this is pretty much how even the thought of you know enjoy Jamie come about. So in that context, I believe it's something like 25, 30 artists actually. I don't have the exact number in front of me. And we said, each of you, please do a song, right? So Arivu did a song, right? And similarly, various artists, both from Chennai and around the world, did songs. And we also wanted Dee to do a song. So we went to Dee and said, hey, Dee, like, we would like you to, because even though, you look at Dee, she's somebody who's been successful in the playback world. As an independent musician, right, she is a brand new artist, right? So prior to Enjoy Njami, like, she did not have any independent music. But the reason we started working with Dee is because of her ambition to do independent music, right? So we told her, like, like, we would like you to also do a song and talk to, Santosh Narayanan as well. And essentially, like, they thought, sure, why not, right? And then in that conversation, because we are also talking to Arivu, like, and, Santosh Narayanan and Dee, like, like, it'd be awesome, because they had some, ideas, and they're like, okay, it'll be great to get Arivu as well. And we also wanted to, like, as much as possible, like, one of the focus area for us is collaboration among artists, because we believe that as a unit, it elevates everyone involved. So we also try to figure out, wherever there could be collaborations, right? For example, to give you an example, another song we did, Free Will, with Praveen Saivi and Shakti Amaran, two independent artists. And we felt, that collaboration could be interesting, right? And together, give them both something different, right? So it's the same thought process. So ultimately, that's how it started. So Enjoy Njami, when MAAJJA initiated that song, it didn't have a name, but it was a Dee song. And Arivu is a featured artist. That is the truth of the matter, right? Now, one thing I think is important to address is feature does not mean you are you're doing less, or you are going to do play a smaller role, right? In the West, it's very common where it's a semantic thing, where, like, a feature simply means who is the lead artist that's initiating the project, and they bring on others to work with them. So, from our perspective, like, we all know the talent of Arivu. That's why we are working with them. And ultimately, he did an amazing job. So with Enjoy Njami, there's no question about, Arivu putting, like, 200% in whatever he did. And he is a core part of the success of the song. But however, the song, it was a Dee song, right? Featuring Arivu. It's the same way, like, for example, like, if you take a look at DJ Khaled as an example, right? He released an album recently, and every single song is DJ Khaled featuring so-and-so. And in that case, DJ Khaled, like, may not have even sung or performed in the song. Whoever, quote unquote, featured would have mightily, contributed a lot. But at the end of the day, it's a DJ Khaled project, right? He is the one incubating it and bringing the artists together. So we look at featuring from that perspective, not as a way of saying you are less or you are more, right? So I think that is an important nuance that should be noted. Just because somebody is featured doesn't mean they are going to do any less or any more, because we expect every single artist on a track to give their best, and that's the kind of passionate artists we work with. And whatever is needed for the track, um, collectively as a unit, whoever's involved, do what it takes, right? Because at the end of the day, it's music, it's art form, it's expression.
Right. I think the question, like the featured word, also threw one off because in an Indian context,
Yeah,
this is what would be called a duet, in the sense of like there is not in the conventional sense, but there's a male voice and there's a female voice.
sure.
So when you let's say Tamil playback music, you might say uh, this song has been sung by S.P. Balasubramaniam and S. Janaki, or in a Hindi context, you might say this song has been sung by Asha Bhosle and Kishore Kumar. You would not say the song is Asha Bhosle featuring Kishore Kumar, or it's sung by S.P. Balasubramaniam featuring thing. So was there something contractual about this when you say it was a the song as opposed to like a the and Arivu song in this?
No, so there again, like at the end of the day, like there are a lot of things done in the Indian context, right? We don't agree with, right?
Okay.
Because if everything that's done in India is perfectly done, there's no reason for MAAJJA to exist, right? So a lot of the things we do, we are intentional about it. We are clear about why we are doing it, and often it's going to go against the grain, right? So I mean, I could go on and on about what we saw as, because in India, as you know, like music is so intertwined with movies industry, and because of that, you have practices and approaches that are so unique and only done in India, nowhere else in the world, right? So ultimately, for us, the ambition is, like to step back and ask the question, why does MAAJJA exist? It's as fundamental as you have, if you look at South Asians as a whole, like billions of people, then you could say that if 100 million of them or 10% of them at least would have some form of like musical interest. And if you say, okay, let's take 1%, like that's like 10 million people who are probably trained formally and are skilled. And out of that, I would argue you have probably a solid 1 million talent that is world class, that could rival anyone in the world, right? But then if you look at representation at the global level, whether you're the Grammys or whatever, who do we have, right? We have A.R. Rasser, who's kind of made a mark, and we had MIA on the other hand, who's been able to break through. So the numbers do not add up, right? Like ultimately, like this is what, from MAAJJA perspective, the problem that we want to tackle and challenge is how do we, at the global level, create opportunities and avenues for artists to be represented. So what that means is we are always looking at global context and our approaches, and everything we do. If we were to just say, okay, this is the norm, this is the semantic, then there's no reason for MAAJJA to exist, because there's been enough parties in the industry following that norm. And we frankly feel a lot of that to be problematic and essentially hurdles to why we haven't seen our talent rise up to the global level, right? So to your point, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of things we do. It's going to be against the grain. I could assure that. And in fact, if we are doing the same thing as everyone else, I would want people to challenge us and question us, like, you guys said all these things, but what you're doing is no different, right? So no, there's nothing contractual. But, for example, any artist we work with, they, for the album or whatever, they bring on another artist, we would recommend the same thing. And it's at the end of the day, the artist discussion, right? Whoever the primary artist, as to how they want to go about it. And as I said, to reiterate, it does not imply somebody did less or more. It just means who actually is kicking off that particular song, and starting the process, right? And that's pretty much how we look at it.
Firstly, thanks, Noel, for I appreciate the fact that you're having this open conversation with us. Not many people do that, but I do have some questions, some uncomfortable questions to ask. Primarily because I'm sure you've seen the sort of online reaction that has happened towards two recent things that have happened with Enjoy Me. And I know that MAAJJA is a lot more than just this one song. And I do have a second question that I'm hoping you can address. But firstly, I think that what's on top of everybody's mind is, Arivu is a very special artist. And I think we have to take him in the context within which he exists, where he belongs to a marginalized community. The fact that MAAJJA gave him this platform and put him in this video was, putting him under the spotlight to an extent that he had never been granted before. And I think that's one of the reasons why everybody loved this song. It was not just the fact that it's a great song. His contribution, his story became an integral part of why this song became so popular. Be it his is a featured role. I think that that's also why so many people connected with it. And then two things subsequently happened that I think that a lot of people were taken aback by, and there have been some strong reactions to it. Firstly, it was the Spotify remix of the song, which was done by DJ Snake. And I'm not sure how much creative control MAAJJA as a label has when these songs are, labels typically do have some element of creative control. So I don't know that a lot of people felt that remix sort of diminished his part and took away some of the best parts of the song. And not only that, there was a Spotify billboard that was put up. And I think that what was so great about the fact that Arivu was given this platform was that it was a question of representation. And that's exactly what I think conceptually you've set out to do with MAAJJA, which is essentially give artists this platform that they don't. And when it comes to artists who belong to marginalized communities such as Arivu, I think we have to give them a step up over and beyond what we give everybody else, because that's what affirmative action is. And that's what I was hoping that everybody was really applauded and appreciated when the song came out. Now, what happened with that remix was not only the fact that the remix sort of, deleted some of his verses. There was a billboard that was put up and, giving an South Asian artist exposure, like putting them on a Times Square billboard. That is such a great opportunity to sort of give them to sort of say that they've arrived. It's such a sense of validation for them to have Arivu not on that billboard, to only have thee and DJ Snake, even though, like we said, he was such a big integral part of why the song became so popular, was I think something that a lot of people felt was some sort of erasure. And then just a few days ago, you had a Rolling Stone cover where Arivu is part of the story, but he's not on the cover. So in two cases, it's about representation. It's about somebody who, like I said, has to be given some kind of, cannot be treated on the same level as us. It has to be given a step up because he is, as I said, if we are looking at this from the lens of affirmative action, we have to we cannot place him because he has not had the privileges that somebody like Dee and Santosh have had or currently have, and therefore I think I want you to just what is your reaction when you saw those, the backlash, the online backlash that you've definitely seen, I'm sure, about these two instances. And I think what was so surprising about the Rolling Stone cover is because the whole thing just happened with the Spotify billboard and the remix, and now it's sort of happened again. And I think that it's just the sensitivity which one would hope that labels and art practitioners and people in power and people who hold the power, which in this case would be the media, which would be labels, there's a hope from them. And I think that that's the disappointment. The source of disappointment has been the fact that, this artist has been given this amazing platform, but now he's being repeatedly, there's repeated erasure that's been happening. And of course, it's the fact that he's been silent about it. Now, there's been some criticism that he's been silent about it. Now, I wouldn't, like I said, I don't want to question about that, but I do want to ask you on a related note. You said that one of the main aims, and you've reiterated that, a few times today in our conversation about how one of the main aims of MAAJJA is to give artists a global platform and to help them sustain themselves financially. So I wanted to know, when it comes to rights and royalties, how are MAAJJA's deals structured? Are they different from how they're done in India, where a lot of it is work for hire, or is it different, or like you said, in the West, where there's an agreement, there's a if you could share how your deals are structured, and also whether all your deals are also management deals. So is it like a 360 thing? So two questions really, but I'm sorry for taking up. It's a long question, but I'd really appreciate if you could tell us where you guys are coming from.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are quite a few things you touched on. So, if I miss anything, please remind me. So I think stepping back first and foremost about Arivu as an artist, as a talent, right, is undeniable, right? Mm-hmm. That is why we see a lot of potential, and we see a long, successful career ahead of him. And we believe in him, right? That's why we started working with him. So it's kind of ironic, or doesn't have any logic for us as a company who wants to elevate him, who gave him the platform, to then now turn around and say, okay, Arivu, we are going to now erase you, or we're not going to now give you that visibility. It makes no sense, right? Because MAAJJA is successful when the artist we work with, every single one, is successful and able to do the maximum they can do. And when I touch on the deal structure, it will also validate what I'm saying now, because unless the artist is successful and artist is able to monetize, right, there is nothing in it for us. So it's, as a business, it is counterintuitive for us to say we have an artist and we are going to actually do a disservice to you, right? So I just want to make that statement, because I think I look at some of these accusations, and just because the optics and what you see on the surface level is not what you want it to be, then obviously I think a lot of people draw a lot of conclusions. So now, in the context of, again, I cannot pretend to understand the pain of Arivu, right? But one thing I could tell you is, I am a Tamil born in a country called Sri Lanka, right? And just trust me when I say I firsthand know what oppression is. I firsthand know what it's like when one group doesn't treat another group fairly. And even now, I live in Canada, and even a country that's established and developed like Canada, I don't know if you've been following what's been done to the Native people of the land, and how many kids were killed in the process, etc., etc. So, at a personal level, I have my own story, and I've seen it firsthand as to how this inequality exists, how oppression exists, and so on, right? So I definitely fully sympathize and empathize, actually, with anyone, because we live in a really cruel world. People find more reason to divide each other, whether it is by religion, race, caste, whatever it may be. And it's very sad and unfortunate, right? And one of the things A.R. sir keeps talking about is, hey, music is one of the rare things that we could use as a tool to bring people together. So from MAAJJA perspective, we are, not a political organization. And when we say equality, when we say let's treat people fairly, right? It's something that's in our blood. because as individuals, we all had our own story. But that's, not to say that, we understand exactly, because we are not Arivu or someone of his community, right? So I totally understand the anger. I totally understand the reaction of people because I've seen it from my own people, right? Um, so that is all I think expected, because somebody who's been mistreated for years and years and years, right? Um, it's going to obviously be looking for these things, and if something doesn't look right, which in the past would have been done intentionally to them, and they would have the reaction that we are seeing. So, I mean, I actually am happy by the level of engagement, and I'm happy by the community stepping up and looking for these things, because that's very important, so that things don't get, thrown under the rug and made to look like everything is perfect, right? So I think that's a great thing. Now, specifically what you talked about, the DJ Snake remix, right? Again, like if it's okay, I will give context as to how that song came about, and exactly what happened, and hopefully again that would probably shed some light, right? So first and foremost, enjoy Njami, right? I'm just repeating the same thing I said before. Like, there's no question about the contribution of Arivu, right? The success of Enjoy Njami, there are 3 artists on the song who each of them, even though as individuals they have done music, but when they came together, I would say took it to another level, right? Every single one of them. Like, it's probably the best work of Arivu, it's probably the best work of Santosh Narayanan in my mind, and it's probably the best work of D as well, right? The reason I say this is, you have data in front of you when you go look at their catalog as individuals that they've done, right? So it's not like they haven't done music, but then when they came together, magic happened. And then, of course, that's from a song and sound perspective. Then we had Amit Krishnan and Studio Mocha, like they took it to another level. So it was almost like a dream project, and which is exactly what we wanted, right? We wanted to create a blueprint to show that, hey, this is supposed to be something that inspires others, because at some point, you look at what's happening and you feel discouraged, right? Like, so we wanted something that people look up to and say that, wow, it's our people that did that. And we are hoping that's going to inspire many more to do even greater things. The same way, ARR sir, even MIA, when we talk to them, they are legends in their own way. But what motivates them and inspires them to do the thing they do today is hoping that the next generation will do even greater things and surpass them. And when with Enjoy Njami, like that was our ambition, right? So there's no denying the talent we have and each of their contribution, right? So that happened. Now, when the song is done, we wanted to maximize and amplify the song as well as, artists that are part of it, right? Because again, the song was great, but it was primarily still an audience from India, right? And outside of India, it was not still well known. Even the numbers are great, right? But when you look at the analytics in the back end, I could tell you it was more like 75-25 or 80-20 type split, where primarily audience was still from India, right? So one other thing we wanted to do is introduce the song, introduce all these artists to new audience in the world, right? So we always look at that because for us, how do we amplify a song? How do we do things or try things as different to get to new audience is a core aspect of what we do, right? So then what had happened is, organically actually, DJ Snake had reached out to D, right? He had heard the song because later on we found out that one of his best friends is actually a South Indian Tamil. And, I think, he must have played it to him, and he really liked it. And he really liked Dee's voice, for example. And he's like, this is somebody I want to collaborate with, right? And he had reached out to Dee. So it's not something MAAJJA said, okay, here is a song. Even though we were looking at those kind of opportunities, coincidentally, he had already reached out to Dee. And then simultaneously, from a Spotify perspective, there was a marketing campaign they were doing to showcase an artist, right? And they've been intrigued by Dee, and they've been like looking at her for different campaigns and opportunity as well. And this was something that was happening in parallel, right? So because obviously Spotify launched in India and they're growing and they're looking to introduce new programs. They are in their early days, relatively speaking, right, compared to the rest of the world. So that also happened. So when these things are playing out, ultimately from a content perspective, it's not something where we said, okay, DJ Snake come over here, and then Dee or Santosh Nayan or Arivu come over here. You guys sit down, or MAAJJA, as MAAJJA, we're going to create the song, right? That's not how these remakes work, and that's again a nuance that gets lost, because ultimately you have an original song with the original artist, but somebody taking it and doing their spin on it ends up creating essentially a new song, right? And this has been done in the West all the time. The whole genre of hip hop, if you look at it, is based on reusing, sampling prior work, right? Like, for example, there's Wild Thoughts, Rihanna, it's like a big hit. Mm-hmm. That was a remake of, Maria Maria, which was done by, Carlos Santana and so on, right? But that song itself, with Wyclef, I guess, and that song itself had samples from, Wu-Tang Clan, which is a group from the 90s, right? So essentially, this is essentially done very commonly in the West, where an artist is inspired by or likes what they hear, whether it is the production, whether it is the voice, whatever it may be, and they choose to create something of their own in whatever way. So they end up licensing the original for that purpose. But the creative freedom is with the new creator, right? And ultimately, obviously, the original right holders benefit from it. This has been done in Tamil all the time. Like, for example, Ponmahal Vandal, My Name is Billa, right? Both these songs, have been remade. And if you go look at the new version, right, new producers, new singers, new actors representing it, right? Like if you take Ponmahal Vandal, I believe it's A.R. Sir, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and I believe it's, actor Vijay's song. And the person who sang it, or etc. Like if you look at this, there's absolutely no reference to who the original creators are.
Yeah, and it happens in Bollywood all the time, and terribly. It's happened with ARR and Masuk Ali, which is so terrible. But I mean, even if you don't have any control over the creative freedom of what DJ Snake did with the song, did you not have any say in the billboard that went up, that Spotify put up, or the Rolling Stone cover?
Yeah. So I want to get to that. So definitely, I think when we look at this as like we work with a set of artists, and like the key thing I'm highlighting there is, it was not something MAAJJA went and said, DJ Snake, please make a song, and please work with Dee, right? This is other way around. So same way we always get inbound requests. I'll tell you right now, we always get asked about using the composition only, right? Where they want to license the composition. They are not interested in the Tamil lyrics or the vocals of neither Arivu nor Dee, right? And if it makes sense, because at the end of the day, any derivative benefit will apply to every single original creator. So as a company looking at this, we look at, is this a good opportunity or not? Is it a win for the original creators? And we may, decide to go forward with it. So if, for example, like I'll give you, this is a real example where we've been reached out multiple times for just licensing the composition, right? And when that happens, doesn't mean now all of a sudden like we are erasing both Arivu and D, right? And I could assure you, when that happens, there will not be any presence of Arivu or D, right? Because they may have some totally different faces to the song, or they may not even have a face to this, whatever that comes with it, right? So it's ultimately, that is what this remix thing happened. So for example, in this case, as I mentioned, so it happened, and the Spotify singles program highlighted D, and pretty much, we looked at these two and say, okay, like, let's go use this opportunity to amplify the song further. That's how we looked at it. Because for us, when we look at the remix, what we were hoping would happen, meaning the audience flipped, where 75-80% came from outside of India, right? And ultimately, strategically, what we wanted was, now that audience are curious about the song and go listen to the original song, right? So strategically, that's from MAAJJA perspective. When I say that anytime this kind of things happen, it benefits all the artists. We saw it happening now. So today, because of the remix, every single artist, right, whether it is Arivu or D or Santosh Narayanan, are presented in regions that they previously may or may not have had any presence or very little presence. So now all of a sudden there's complementary audience. So again, this is not done with optics. Like if you do it with optics, like that may or may not correlate to the results, right? So at the end of the day, we look at movements for artists, and in that case, the way DJ Snake wanted to collaborate with D and how it came about was a movement that they decided to feature, D. Similarly, we work with, like right now, to your point about Rolling Stone cover. That original thing is like, there's a story on MAAJJA that was written, right? And ultimately, when that happened, before anything, like they reached out and they said, okay, we want to do a story, and these are the questions we want to talk to so and so, right? So for example, in case of the story, as you mentioned, Arivu, along with ARR Sir, along with Sana, along with like NAS 47, they were all given the questions that Rolling Stone provided. We provided press images and everything, and we provided everything back. But what happened in that case is it was a digital rollout, right? Which means, unlike a physical print, you don't look at the whole thing that was done for the story, right? If I'm holding a physical magazine, when I start flipping through the pages, there's less room for jumping the gun or conclusion because everything is there for me. In case of a digital rollout, essentially Rolling Stone was releasing whatever part of their overall rollout across multiple days on a calendar, and they're still not done. And
so is there another cover with Arivu on it? Is that what you're saying?
So basically, yeah, like ultimately that's essentially it, right? So pretty much, even when they put out that first post, even the story was not out. The story itself, they released it. This is again very digital way of doing things, right? And so now whatever they've been doing is what they were planning on doing all along. So for example, they put a post about where they put and teased the four artists, right? ARR, Arivu, Navs, and Sana. Then of course, people jump in and say, okay, like they are reacting to it. But I could tell you, like that was details behind whatever they were doing was given to them like before they even said anything about this, right? And as I said, like there's basically rollout that's continuing on, and it's going to happen. But at the end of the day, like what I'm saying is like when we look at these opportunities, right? There are moments that different artists have depending on upcoming milestones. So there is going to be a cover of Arivu and prominent feature of Arivu when, let's say, we're talking about his album rollout, as an example, right? When that happens, there's going to be no reference to anyone else, and that doesn't mean now all of a sudden we are ignoring or erasing some other artists, right? So because for us, because all these artists are not working on things simultaneously, right? And they do not have announcements or releases, etc., coming up at the same time. So in this case, the cover is nothing to do with the songs. And I think what happened was when the post came out, they referred to Enjoy Enjoy and Nioli. People saw it as, this is like, I mean, I could totally get that. Like what you see from optics perspective is, oh wow, like look, they are like talking about the song and doing a story, yet Arivu is nowhere to be found. I totally understand that, right? But at the same time, there's been many stories done, many instances where Arivu talks about it. Because again, let's face it, right? There are 3 artists involved. Whenever you have Arivu or D or Santosh Narayan and be part of anything they do as individuals, because of the success of Enjoy Me, the reference will be there, right? Like, it's something that's going to happen for every one of them. And it has happened. Like, for example, Arivu's had stories done, right? Where, any journalist or writer would, when you're explaining the profile of Arivu, you're going to talk about Enjoy Me. Now, when that happens, if they mention or refer to D or Santosh Narayan, who are equally on the song, that's fine. But if they don't mention it, is that something we see as a problem? Absolutely not, right? So, for example, I believe as recently as for the Independence Day, there was something that Arivu did, right? It was a feature on Arivu, and that story had reference to Enjoy Me, right? They did, say where D is here, Santosh Narayan is here. No, because in our view, that's not relevant because the story is about Arivu, right? So I think when looking at these things in isolation, I think, especially with lack of communication, these conclusions could be drawn. So I don't think, I'm not going to blame the people's reaction because from their lens, what they saw was injustice. But from MAAJJA perspective, we are clear about what we're doing and our intention as to what we do want to work, what we want to do for every single artist we work with. And when that happens, like one thing MAAJJA will not do is play politics and try to please people or do things, because I am personally against this idea of window dressing anything. Like if you do something and we made a mistake or we did something wrong, I have no problem correcting it. But just because somebody may get upset because they do not understand full context of the full story, I'm not going to do something to change what we would normally do, because that would be a disservice to somebody else. To your point, right? Like, for example, Naz 47, right? She is a Ulan Tamil woman, right? She has her own pain. She has her own struggle. She has her own oppression that she's gone through, right? So you could take this and dissect it in multiple ways and say that, hey, how come Navs is not on the cover, right?
I think that's slightly disingenuous because you're talking about 2 artists that work with Arivu that have been put on the cover of something. and he's sort of like the connection between them. And I think that, I mean, like you said, you can't look at things in isolation. And I think the point being that you had just had that backlash from the Spotify billboard, and you're saying, okay, Spotify, that was Spotify's call, from what I understand. But a cover where you provided the press images, you've sort of been part of this, they've sent you the questions. Ultimately, that I presume that's a joint decision. And like, from what I gather, it's that you're saying right now it's the and SVP that have projects out, and which is why they are the face of MAAJJA at the moment. And Arivu doesn't have a project coming out right now, and that's why he's not on the cover, which makes logical sense. But like, from perspective where you're talking about the two singles or the two songs that have the reason why they've been featured on this cover, because these are the two songs that have become their biggest hits, and the guy who wrote them is not on the cover, and the fact that there's this history and this context, I think it goes beyond just the idea of who's on our marketing, who's right now on the marketing conveyor belt right now. And I mean, like, I know we've been speaking about it for a long time, so I don't necessarily want to, we could talk about this at length. If you'd like to address the part about the structure of the deals.
Yeah. But again, just so that, like, one thing you said though, like, Sean, Vincent de Paul, and Dee are not that in that image because of the songs, right? I think that's the main point I want to get across. If it's about the song, right? There's no question that if you are promoting, like I told this to everyone, right? Like, we don't promote Enjoy Njami, right? Because we launched Enjoy Njami, now we are looking at what the artists are doing next, right? But reference to those songs will come up, and that's inevitable. And ultimately, it is something that's going to keep happening both ways. Like, for example, as I said, like, Arivu has been featured on different stories or whatever he does, right? And there's reference to Enjoy Njami also, right? And we see absolutely nothing wrong with that, because it's, part of his catalog. And ultimately, as MAAJJA, we are not like looking at this as, is that, because if that's a initiative of Arivu, and when somebody's covering it, it's being talked about. So similarly, as I said, with the Rolling Stone cover, like, one thing is, like, in terms of what happens, I don't want to like pass on responsibility. Like, I take responsibility, right? It's not like, whether it's Spotify or whether it is Rolling Stone, right? At the end of the day, it's our artist, and I cannot sit here and say that, it happened and we had no control, right? But what I can tell you also is, we don't go to like Rolling Stone, because they have an editorial team, curation team, and essentially dictate what you should do, how you should do it. So we saw that post just like everyone else. There was no preview to us, right? Like, it's not, we saw that post the exact same way, but only difference is we had context as to the full story, and we have context as to what's still to come. So that's why, like, all this uproar, right? To me, I don't have the same reaction to it, because from MAAJJA perspective, we have complete view of the picture, and unfortunately, that's not there for everyone involved, right? And that's why I could understand why there's an uproar. So would we do anything different in this case? Absolutely not, right? Does that mean Arivu is not important, or we don't want to feature Arivu, right? That those two are not related, right? Because every time we talk to Arivu, we talk about Arivu, how is it going? How is the catalog coming, right? So when we worked with Arivu, started with Arivu, it's because we want to release an album with Arivu, right? And ultimately, when the moment is right, and I'm sure he would be the first one to announce it, or we would announce it, whatever it is, and ultimately all this would happen. So in this current moment, in isolation, it may look that way. And from our perspective, our intentions and what we are trying to do at a greater scale, right? We have clarity on, so we are not really bothered by it. Now, from a deal structure perspective, to your point. So again, the purpose of MAAJJA is to address some fundamental challenges we see in the industry, right? One of which is whether artists are compensated fairly to the intellectual property, right? And second one is from our ethos perspective, like allowing artists to have complete creative control. So there's two things. Like we want artists to own the rights. We want them to have creative control, right? Because we see both of these are key problems, and without addressing them, we don't believe we could change the narrative, right? So our deal structure, we are absolutely against this work for hire model for an independent artist, right? But there's nothing illegal about it, right? It's ultimately, if an artist chooses to take a payment and hand over their rights, they are doing that, and hopefully they're doing it because they're informed about what they're doing, right? So there's absolutely nothing wrong with taking a payment and handing over your rights, but we hope that artists understand what they're doing. Any artist we work with, or anyone that comes to us and try to propose projects to us, we look at this closely to see, because for us it's about empowering independent musicians. So we need to make sure that if whatever song becomes a hit or success, the artists involved are going to benefit from it, right?
You go 50-50 on master and publishing? Is that how you do it? Because a lot of independent labels do it like that.
Basically, in terms of like what I could tell you is the specifics of the deal, right? It's not fair to talk about because of the artist, but I could tell you that I've seen all the deals in India, and a lot of the artists that come to us after being presented with deals by all the other players. So I could tell you from our perspective, right? I haven't seen anyone else allowing the artist to own 100% of the rights, right? Because for us, that's a huge thing, because at the end of the day, we believe, like, you take a song like Enjoy Enjami, right? In terms of monetization for the artist involved, if it was done with a work for hire model, right, then ultimately, like, it would be total injustice and disservice to the artist, right? So we see that as the biggest value, but ultimately we don't pay any artist, and it's not because of anything. It's simply because we do not believe in taking over the rights of the content, and we believe, like, what we want to do and encourage is, as an artist, build your catalog, start putting out content, but own your catalog, and that movement will happen at some point where a song will become a hit, because not every song is going to become a hit, right? But if you take a long-term approach, you're going to be sitting on a catalog where you have the rights to, and when that movement happens, it will lift your entire catalog up, right? So if you take a look at every single artist we work with, whether it is Arivu, whether it is Sean Vincent de Paul, Navs, and so on, we have data to show this has happened, right? Meaning they have the catalog. So when something good happens, the impact is not for that one song, rather for their whole catalog. And they will only benefit if they have the rights to the catalog, right? So this is fundamentally our view as to why we are against this work for hire model. And one thing again is, I believe that paying independent musicians an amount is, in some cases, you could argue that it's taking advantage of them in one way, because it could be argued that it's opportunistic and paying some nominal amount and not allowing them to benefit from their own creation, right? And I don't know how many artists that do so because they understand this. Because I've seen deals where even the performance rights are taken away, right? So imagine being an artist where you create all this content because you love it, and then you might get paid some amount. Whether you actually get paid is a different story, but at least you may be given the promise to be paid an amount. And then later on, you don't even have the right to go perform that song on stage, right? So this is the reality on the ground, right? And I'm glad that this conversation is happening, because even though, you know, we are happy to like be transparent as much as possible to talk about it. What I want happening is, you know, all these people to go look at all the work that these artists have done and ask the question, like, you know, like, have they been paid, right? Like, I'll tell you a simple thing from publishing. You asked about publishing, like Arivu, for example. How many songs has he written, right? There are many hits he's done, right? And we are in the process of cleaning up publishing for him, because, again, the nuances are not understood, right? So, for example, he's an artist by the name of Arivu. If you go look at his catalog, if you put Arivu as the writer, he's not, you know, by default going to get the publishing share. Because when you, from a publishing perspective, like, you need to put the legal name of the artist, right? So these are simple things. So, for example, like that's, I think, also a challenge. I see that people are passionate and they are looking to support and make sure injustice is not done, but there's a significant knowledge gap as to what should happen. And often, because something's been happening for a long time, accepted as, oh, this is the right way, therefore something that's not done this way is something suspicious, right? Meanwhile, MAAJJA will always be doing very likely something that is not being done, because if we do the same thing that's been done, then there's no purpose or reason for MAAJJA to exist. Yeah. So I could assure you, because again, at the end of the day, like, I want to be fair to all the artists, and you know, to talk specifics, you know, it needs to be consensus based and all that stuff. So, but I could assure you, like, if an artist that we work with, you know, has a better deal, they would be elsewhere, right? And allowing artists to own their masters is something we are very proud of, and it's a core ethos of what we do. And pretty much to your point about, is it a management deal, whatever, like, again, I don't want to get into the details, but let's say it's a hybrid deal, because we are able to come up with a creative way of allowing the artist to own the masters, while making it a win both the artist and MAAJJA. And I could also tell you, MAAJJA does not make a cent of revenue unless the artist makes money, right? So you've been in the industry, and I'm sure you could kind of see the differences, right? Like, basically, there are a lot of deals out there where there's recoupment that happens, right? Artists are not paid anything. Even though optics wise, outside world, everything will look perfect and great, but artists is like far away from monetization. In all of our deals, we make sure that first the artist makes money before MAAJJA is making money, and it's a win-win. We truly believe it's a win-win partnership.
I just had this one question. Looking back, you know, at what happened with the backlash with the Times Square billboard and with the Spotify, you know, what they did. Do you think that maybe, did you have any internal discussions within MAAJJA about, you know, the kind of because it's also, you know, about the image of the company, because it's not just about putting out music, it's also a company's reputation. There's, like, you know, these positive vibes around a company. So when, you know, you get to this Rolling Stone stage, you know, were there discussions that happened that said, you know, are we, you know, like should we, make this about Arivu also, because he's such an integral part of the song as much as the. Were there any internal discussions, or was it just completely left to Rolling Stone to do their own thing?
So we are very particular about knowing our, how do I say, like just with the musicians we work with, we try very hard to step back and avoid trying to get in there and say, do the song this way, do the song that way. Similarly, when it comes to any form of journalism, like, the same way, like I'm being very transparent with you guys here, right? And I trust that, when you write about this or when you cover this, like you would like have a better context and do the right thing, because like we respect that boundary. The same way, like, when MAAJJA does something, right, we expect to be given that space, right, and the benefit of the doubt. So from that perspective, we wouldn't do anything where we say, oh my God, this may make our life easy, therefore let's do this, right? Because that wouldn't be the right thing to do, right? If the right thing to do is in sync with what makes our life easy, we would do that. But if it's about doing the easy things, then everyone would be doing it, right? And second point is, the campaign rollout happened and it's still happening. So Arivu is part of the story. There is more to come, right? And we knew that. And so we were not bothered by it. And ultimately, it was surprising, to be honest, when the reaction happened, because I guess we had different contexts, right? Because for us, we had given all these images of Arivu. We know that, Rolling Stone is a credible, magazine, an organization with a great team. So they know what they're doing. We don't need to go tell them. It's like somebody coming to MAAJJA and say, hey, MAAJJA, like, I mean, this is happening on Twitter too, right? Everyone has their opinion about, how the deal should be structured, all that stuff, which is great. But respectfully, we would like to hope that we know what we are doing in an area that we are focused on, and give the same, space and respect to other partners we work with, right? So basically, from our perspective, we did not feel in any way that we are like, subduing Arivu. In fact, Arivu is part of the story. There's, I think probably, when the campaign wraps up, people will see. And I hope that, they have a better perspective. But then again, it may be something that people may look and criticize and say, oh, now you're doing it because, we kind of like spoke about it, right? So that I don't think we could be, as MAAJJA, we could be bothered by that, because we are not here to please people. And the main thing is do the right thing and make sure that our intentions are clear. Make sure we do the right thing for the artist. Because fundamentally, that's what we are about. And if that means, we get criticized for it because in that moment, something's not clear, I hope over time, things become clear and people see why we are doing what we are doing.